So I started reading Brene Brown stuff about vulnerability, and I got really into it. I guess that's when I first started noticing I felt anything about that situation, but I still had trouble pegging it down. So then about 8 years ago, I really started looking into it, and I was thinking,
what's up everybody? I hope you're doing well. A super long time ago when I first started this channel, I made a whole video about things to consider when you do your initial phone screen in private practice. But one item that I feel isn't really talked about enough is the therapeutic aspect of the initial phone screen. For most potential clients, this is gonna be the very first time that they're interacting directly with us, except maybe for like a coordination email or something like that. And so this is really going to set the tone of the therapeutic frame of the relationship. It's so important in that first call for potential clients to feel a sense of trust and safety with us. And something I want to make clear is how important it is for us to hold that therapeutic frame regardless of whether somebody chooses to book with us or not. If somebody wants to book with me and I see that I'm equipped to support them, great. And if it makes sense to refer out, I still want them to feel cared for, well supported, and like I handed them off to the referral in a way that felt very safe. And another thing I want to name is that initial phone call, of course, is not therapy. This is a potential client. They haven't become a therapy client yet. However, I do think it's very important that we hold a therapeutic frame. So in this video, I'm going to share some of the tools that I at least try to utilize in that initial phone screen to help potential clients feel cared for and supported, regardless of whether they end up booking with me or not. So for me, there are 4 main goals of that initial phone screen: to express empathy, screen for fit, answer questions, and instill hope. For today's purposes, I'm going to focus specifically on that first one, expressing empathy. I remember for me as a graduate student, the initial phone screen at the agencies that I interned at felt very administrative. It was almost like I was taking off my therapist hat and putting on my admin hat. Often the initial phone screen sounded something like this. And how many hours of sleep do you get at night? Okay. Are you drinking or using substances? Right. And are you having thoughts of harming yourself or others? Okay. Sometimes it felt like we were expected to just sort of breeze through a quick checklist, almost like, I don't know, we were running through somebody's grocery shopping list or something that wasn't emotionally charged at all. And did you buy milk? Right. What about eggs? Okay. But usually the initial phone screen is incredibly uncomfortable for potential clients, even for me. As a therapist, when I go to reach out to a therapist, I feel uncomfortable during the initial phone screen. So imagine a potential client who maybe has had minimal or no exposure to any therapeutic experience. Maybe this is the very first time they're answering some of the questions we're asking them about. Or unfortunately, for some potential clients, they may have been burned by negative experiences with prior therapists, and they're coming in feeling pretty closed off to therapy in general. So personally, I believe that we need to approach the initial phone screen as a therapist rather than as a telemarketer. But I can almost hear you asking the question, how do we do that when it's just a 15-minute phone screen and not a full-on 50-minute therapy session? So glad you asked. As a rule of thumb, in the initial phone screen, I personally generally try to avoid open-ended questions. When in the therapy experience, I tend to lean quite heavily in open-ended questions. Open-ended questions are a naturally curious approach, and so even without expressing any other empathy, just saying, tell me more about that, or how did that make you feel? That can convey a certain amount of empathy just kind of all on its own. But when we have a closed-ended question, it can sometimes feel a little bit less empathic. Like, did you try to hurt yourself? Did you try to hurt somebody else? Were you seeing things that weren't there? Did you hear things that other people couldn't hear? Check, check. And it could sort of feel like I'm just after the answer and I don't really care about your experience. When we offer those open-ended therapeutic questions in that initial phone screen, the conversation can start to get away from us like a runaway train. Oh, wow, that sounds terrible. And how did that make you feel? Well, when it first happened 10 years ago, I didn't even know how it made me feel. But then I read this book.
have you heard of Brene Brown? So I started reading Brene Brown stuff about vulnerability, and I got really into it. I guess that's when I first started noticing I felt anything about that situation, but I still had trouble pegging it down. So then about 8 years ago, I really started looking into it, and I was thinking...
So since the phone screen only really allows time for closed-ended questions, I like to couch those questions within empathic statements. When we keep our questions closed-ended, It helps us stay within our time frame, and then we can follow up with empathic validation, and we can acknowledge that there's so much more to the story that we don't have time for today. Wow, that sounds terrible. I realize there's so much more to that story that we just won't be able to touch on during our call today. So if we do meet in the future, I'd really like to ask you more about that. So thank you for sharing with me. And would it be all right for now if we switch topics and I asked you a few more questions? A statement like this can offer empathy and validation while also gently closing the door on a topic for now. There are all kinds of empathic micro behaviors we can include in our initial phone call without taking us down an extensive rabbit trail. Here are a few more examples. When we first start the call, it can be helpful to acknowledge how difficult it is to even reach out to the therapist, and also name just how normal it is to feel uncomfortable during this phone call. I know it's a strange and often uncomfortable process to reach out to a therapist, let alone schedule an appointment. So I appreciate you hanging with me for this call, as I'm going to ask you a few questions to see if I'm able to offer the support you're looking for. If a potential client seems especially uncomfortable during the initial call, then I'll take a moment to explain the general structure of our initial call, and I'll also let them know that they have the freedom to pause and ask questions at any point during our call. Yeah, I'm actually kind of freaking out, and I don't know how this is going to go. I understand, that's actually very normal. So how about I give you a little overview of what this call typically looks like, and you can let me know if you have questions or if you want to make any changes to our structure. Another little tool for inserting empathy into the call is, rather than diving straight into your screening questions, have you ever had thoughts of harming yourself or others? Okay. Have you ever misused illicit substances? All right. You can insert instead a quick preface before any personal or potentially uncomfortable questions and invite potential clients to decline to respond if they don't feel comfortable sharing. Okay, so during our call, I'm going to ask you a few personal questions that I ask everyone on the first call. Now, I understand it can be uncomfortable sharing this information with a complete stranger, so let me know if anything I ask is too uncomfortable to discuss and we can adjust. And as a bonus tip, if you have an FAQ section on your website, or if you don't have one and you'd like to create one, you can have a question on that page that says something like, what can I expect during that initial phone call? And then you can explain the structure of the phone call, maybe even describe the nature of some of the questions that you're going to ask. That way, for any clients who are feeling especially nervous about the initial phone screen, they can kind of mentally prepare and get ready for it before even getting on the call. Of course, as always, for all my videos, this is not an exhaustive list of all the ways to insert empathy into your initial phone screen and hold that therapeutic frame, but these are tools I do find myself using universally in every single phone screen, so I thought it might be helpful to share them with you. I'm curious to hear what some of your go-to tools are to help potential clients feel safe with you during the initial phone screen. If you have any, feel free to leave them in the comments below so that other people can glean from your experience as well. And before we close, I'd like to thank TherapyNotes.com for sponsoring this video. TherapyNotes helps with all of your practice management needs, from scheduling to notes to billing. They have a HIPAA-secure telehealth platform included for free for all users, and so much more. If you'd like to check out TherapyNotes, you can get 2 months to try it for free with no commitment just by clicking the link in the description of this video. Well, I hope you found this topic helpful, and I hope we keep having more conversations about how to hold the therapeutic frame above and beyond just the times when we're sitting across from our clients in session. And until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well. I'm pretending I'm on a phone call with someone who's not there.